Hi, welcome to Key Questions for Key Staffers. My name is Jim Atterholt. I'm the Vice Mayor for Fort Myers Beach, and this is a show where we ask key questions to the subject matter experts from the town of Fort Myers Beach, particularly as it relates to post-Ian recovery. And we've got some great guests this morning. We're going to be talking about the beach and the beach recovery and the beach renourishment. But before we do, I wanted to say that this show will be certainly put on all of the town's social media platforms. But also, we ask our friends in the media, the folks at Beach Talk Radio have been great about showing this before their regular scheduled programming. We asked the folks, our friends from the Observer and from the news press and the local TV stations, if they could link to this show whenever they're working on a story that's relevant to these particular programs. And we also ask our friends at home who have Facebook. They've been so great about getting information out. If you see something that you think would be interesting to your friends and neighbors, please link to it on your Facebook page. Abraham Lincoln said, let the people know the facts and the country will be saved. And this is our small attempt to do that here at Town Hall. Again, special guest this morning, Chad Chustz, who is wears a number of hats, but your formal title, Chad, is the Environmental Projects Director, is that right?
Environmental Projects Manager, but I'm happy to be a director.
Well, that sounds good. And Mike,
promotion today.
Mike Poff is a consultant to the town. I have to say, just my 2.5 years on the council, probably one of the best consultants we've ever had from the town of Fort Myers Beach. Mike, what's your formal title and background?
Sure, I'm president of Coastal Engineering Consultants. We've been in Southwest Florida for over 45 years. Our focus is on beach restoration and marine development, marine structures, ecosystem restoration. And so we've been working for the town on a variety of projects, most notably the beach project we'll talk about today, but we've also helped you with the mooring field and some of the docks and other facilities here in the town.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you both being with us this morning.
Thank you, our pleasure.
You guys extremely knowledgeable at a granular level of all the challenges the beach faces. But let's start for our viewers at 10,000 feet. Can you talk, just if you were just to give a generic overview to somebody, let's say you ran into somebody at the coffee shop and they said, post-Ian, what's the condition of the beach at Fort Myers Beach? What would your initial reaction be? How would you describe it?
Well, sure, we've been devastated. The town, the beach, the amount of erosion, we've quantified it at over 220,000 cubic yards of sand. To put that in perspective, the original renourishment project to the north end was around 400,000 yards. So half of that quantity that the town placed with the county's project in 2011 was eroded by the storm, either overwashed into the rest of the town or taken offshore. And so that's a huge, huge quantity that now we have to replace.
You just caused it. I wasn't going to ask this question, but you piqued my interest. Can you, in a ballpark, like percentage-wise, how much of the sand was pushed across the island into the bay versus was pulled back into to the Gulf of Mexico? Is it 50-50? Is it 75-25? Just ballpark.
That we don't really have quantified because we don't have a way to measure that overwash quantity. And offshore, our surveys generally don't even go that far offshore to capture all of the losses plus the distribution into the inlets. So I'm afraid I can't give you a good percentage.
What would be historically, though, when you see storms like this? Does most of the sand get pushed over the island, or does most of it get pulled back into the ocean?
Well, again, great question. Of course, the incoming storm surge did the overwash. Then the return water pulls it back out. I would say in this case, the majority of it was an overwash and distributed into the bay because of the low-lying nature of the beach. Once it got pushed back in, those return waters probably weren't pulling a lot of that debris and sand back out. So
okay, very interesting. So in terms of our strategy, we had a very thorough strategy for renourishment that was going to start at the end of this year, or near the end of this year. How has our strategy changed post-Ian with respect to revitalizing our beach?
Sure. The beach repairs will occur in 2 stages. The first stage will be with coordination through the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. We use a lot of acronyms, so I'll try to define them before I use them. So FEMA will pay to put sand back on the beach in what's called an emergency berm. It's a Category B funding mechanism through FEMA. The state of Florida has a cost component And based upon what the legislature approved in their special session in December, the state officials have told us that the Category B emergency berm will be 100% funded by FEMA and by the state of Florida at no cost to the town. The goal is to get sand back on the beach in this emergency berm configuration to provide some level of storm protection to the properties until we can get the beach project in place. So it's something that's done very rapidly. The FEMA officials have approved the quantity of sand that we estimated. The goal is to put that sand back into basically along the upland, as close to the buildings and armoring and vegetation, what is left of it. We want to get this sand back in place. It has to be brought to a certain elevation to qualify for FEMA funding, which is plus 6.5 above approximately the water line.
This is the berm itself?
This is the berm itself. And in many cases, and we have examples of what this looks like, it's posted on the town's website.
fmbgov.com/beach has the plans on it.
So the construction plans for the berm have been uploaded for people to look at. And so we're trying to mimic what was there before as best as we can. And so the town has already put out the project for bid for the emergency berm, and it's on the street. So contractors are hopefully downloading the documents, are going to be bidding on it. Bids are due, I believe, this Friday.
3rd, yeah. Yep.
And then town council on Monday.
I think they're gonna be calling a special session, and
Okay.
then on the MNP on Thursday, they'll break for a minute
And review the bids.
Review the bids.
So this is happening as we're talking right now. The goal is to get a contractor lined up and start getting sand onto the island into this emergency berm as quickly as we can.
So again, from a lay perspective, this is all different now from the renourishment plans we've been talking about for the last year and a half, 2 years, right? This is a whole new phase that we're talking that's as a result of Hurricane Ian, correct? So
Correct.
this berm, in a perfect world, if everybody signs on, you would literally have I hate to use the word wall, but you'll have a berm wall all the way across the 7-mile island facing the Gulf of Mexico. Is that an overgeneralization?
A little bit, and here's why. The north section, which was restored in 2011, is a whole different funding mechanism through FEMA.
Okay.
So it's going to start right around Canal Street, south of the be around Crescent Beach Park, and go south from there.
Okay.
But there are a couple of sections of beach that didn't qualify. You had to have a certain level of beach in order to have the beach brought to that level again for the Category B. So there's a couple of gaps in the emergency berm that, working with Chad, we're going to try to get filled in using some of the screened sand, or when we come back and do the major project, we'll fill it in. And then once the sand is placed by this contractor, the property owners will be allowed to go in and shape that to create their dune access. We call it an emergency berm, but you're allowed to have an access through there. And so we're going to encourage people on how to do that. But we're not going to have every contractor try to create an access for everybody, because everyone's going to want it at a different location on their property.
What's the difference between a berm and a dune?
Sure. FEMA calls this an emergency berm for the sole purpose of providing some level of storm protection. A dune is designed for that same purpose, and ultimately will be planted with vegetation, and so the berm becomes the dune of the beach project. So while they're different in terms of the construction window, we are incorporating the berm sand into our beach template to, in essence, recreate that dune feature.
And does the berm evolve into a dune when we do the renourishment phase of the project, or is it different?
Good question. Depending on timing of permits for the major project, Chad and I have talked about doing a planting in advance of the beach project on the berm to kickstart the dune plantings and the dune vegetation. So it may happen in 3 stages: the emergency berm sand, the emergency berm vegetation plantings, and then the main project. Or the main project will come in and we'll do the plantings at the end.
And I guess another maybe, I don't want to oversimplify, but a difference between this first wave, this sort of berm permutation, or whatever you want to call it, this infusion of a berm throughout most of the south end of the island, that'll be sand that's trucked in, versus our renourishment plan, which is our longer term plan. That sand will be piped in from offshore off the Gulf of Mexico. Is that a fair generalization?
That is absolutely correct. Because of the emergency order that's issued by the state of Florida, which delegates the to local governments the ability to bring sand in quickly. It comes from an upland source, it's trucked in from an upland mine, and it can happen very quickly. We don't need any additional permits from the federal government or the Corps of Engineers. All the activity is happening on the landward part of the beach, and it's under the emergency order.
Where will that's a lot of sand. This isn't sand coming that was sifted from the beach. Where is this sand coming from?
Sure, there's several approved upland sand quarries and lines in the state of Florida that the state of Florida has reviewed the geology and the geotechnical. And so there's one in Immokalee, there's one in Ortona, and in between there's several mines. The contractor who bids the project has the right to go to any one of those mines and purchase sand to bring to the beach.
So, I don't want to get too granular, but I don't want to forget this question. So, this first wave, the berm wave we'll call it, if you sign your easement, you're going to get the berm wave, but you'll also be the benefit of the broader renourishment plan, which we're going to talk about in a minute. If there's no way to bifurcate that, you can't have one and not have the other. In other words, let's say there's some people concerned about signing this easement because either they've got concerned about the berm or they've got concerned about the renourishment plan. They can't split it. They have to. It's one or you have to take both phases, or in other words, you can't split the two. Correct?
It would be very difficult for us to split the two to manage a construction contract for the berm and then come back and manage the beach project if we have some people who just want A and not B.
Okay.
And so we're encouraging everyone to sign their temporary construction easements. Chad's done a great job of trying to meet with the individual properties. We know a lot of people have questions about the easement. Trust me in that every beach project that's been built in the state of Florida has had some level of construction easement issued. We have this on all of our projects where we have to meet with the property owners and talk about the easement. And the goal is to have the ability to have the contractor and the staff and our firm and the monitors be able to work on the private property, to place that sand, to plant the vegetation, to manage it, to do beach grading in the future if it's needed. There will be some post-construction requirements of beach tilling that softens and loosens the sand for sea turtles. So there's quite a few things that have to happen throughout the life of our permit, and so these easements grant the town the access to do that.
So this berm, where will it? Let's say you have a property on the beach, and let's say you're, to keep it simple, 400 yards from the ocean. Would the berm be 200 yards? Would it be 300 yards from your property, or how far? Where do you put the berm as it relates to the structure and the ocean itself?
Sure. So the goal of the combined beach project and the berm is to place the sand back on the beach that was lost from Ian and that's been lost since 2011 to restore that template, to restore the form and function of the beach and dune. And so we're going to put the berm as far landward on the property as practicable, where we don't interfere with any buildings, any utilities, any pools, any decks, any existing seawalls or revetments, any vegetation that might be left over. So it's going to be on the landward side of the property, away from the water as far as possible, and then the beach project is going to come in and start, and the sand will actually be placed in the water and over the existing beach, and basically the beach fill pumped in will move and intersect that emergency berm sand. So they'll become one and the same once they're both are completed.
So the first wave will be the berm, and that'll be as close to the structures as possible, as practically possible. And then the second wave, the renourishment, will be filling in between the berm and the ocean with a lot of additional sand as well.
Correct.
Okay, that's really helpful.
Yeah, I think it's important to call out that we are working with property owners. Some property owners, maybe because of their beach vendor activity or just simply having chairs that they want to store out on the beach, but not have it impact the sea turtles. We are working with them to have that berm maybe pushed out a little bit, maybe closer to the ECL, which is that state property line.
Which is closer to the ocean.
Right, so then that way you have a vegetated berm, vegetated dune where the sea turtles are coming up and hitting that and not getting caught up in jet skis, laying eggs at the bases of tables, etc.
What happens? The berm's coming along the island, and we've got a couple people, for whatever reason, they choose not to sign the easement. What happens? Just no berm there?
That's correct.
What's the practical impact to others if they choose not to sign the easement and don't have a berm?
Well, certainly the next storm event, that'll be the path of least resistance for water to get through and the force of the storm to get through. So in an ideal situation, we would have a continuous dune system after we're all done. The gaps in the dune system would be where we have either walkovers or paths through the dune. We asked people to maybe make those meandering paths. What we did learn from Ian up and down the coast was if you had a perpendicular access through your dune system on the beach, whether it was Sanibel, Fort Myers Beach, or Collier County beaches, Mother Nature found those low-lying paths and scoured them out. And so if you can meander your path, it'll reduce that ease of flow, put that little kind of frictional resistance in. I think we'll see a lot less scouring if we can accomplish that.
And the timeline in a perfect world for this first phase would be when? When would it start and when would it finish in a perfect world?
So coming to council next week, I believe, you said next Thursday, a special session, then figure 30 days to get the notice of award, the contracts, the insurance, all those things lined up. So hopefully middle of March, we'll start to see sand coming to the beach. And it's about 120 days, plus or minus, is the window we've predicted for this event.
For the berm.
For the berm.
And you're trucking this in, you'll probably go through the beach access points to get the sand. How do you get that sand out to the beach? Just look for various...
So we have construction easements that will get signed with some of the various condos and more convenient spots for them to access different parts of the beach.
I assume Newton Park would be a place, some of the larger
Newton
beach
Park,
access?
sure.
Yeah, okay. So the value of this infusion of sand for the first wave, which the feds and the state are going to cover, it sounds like almost 100%. What's the value of that to our community? Just ballpark. I assume it's in the millions, right?
$7 million.
$7 million.
Correct.
So if everybody signs on, that's a $7 million infusion of sand renourishment that is at no cost to the town.
Correct.
Very interesting. Okay.
I think, just going back to the berm, I think it's important for everybody to understand that, yes, it's 6.5 feet over sea level, but it's once you get up to the elevation of the buildings, we're talking maybe 1-2+ feet elevation off the grade.
Oh, sure.
Michael?
Easily. Sure.
So people are conceptualizing 6-foot berm plus vegetation. They're thinking, oh, my sight line is going to be obstructed.
Right.
Talk a little bit about why you think that won't be as problematic as people might think.
So a couple of reasons. Again, you're talking 6.5 feet above sea level. You walk up 100-200 feet. By the time you get up, you've increased your own elevation. So to get 6.5 feet above sea level, you only need maybe 1-2 feet above the grade at where you're at, where we're placing that berm. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And so then we also have the dune management plan, where we have 3 different planning regimes. Some have more sea oats, some have less sea oats.
Does the landowner get to choose which type of vegetation they would like, or which I don't know if we can say vegetation or which plan?
Absolutely. So the property owner has a say in kind of the configuration of the dunes, where we want it to still maintain that frontal dune, but maybe we're having different kind of bunkers or.
Does that discussion occur while they sign the easement, or does that discussion occur later, or?
Before we put the sand down, or after we put the sand down, hopefully before. In the dune management plan, they have basically it spells out how the process will work, and I'll meet with the property owner, go with where they want their configuration, where they want their paths, and then we put that on a piece of paper. And we'll get it recorded with their easement, so it lasts in perpetuity. So if I'm not here, they can go refer back to that piece of paper, say, no, I'm allowed to maintain this access.
And is it structured in a way, Chad and Mike, that the 3 options, the landowner really can choose any of the 3 and have complete authority over which course is taken?
Correct.
So the town's not going to say, well, normally we let you choose, but you can't because of your property is different. So they will have a choice for all 3, no matter what the situation is?
Yes, and I think we're gonna work on maybe some technology, maybe a form or something that we can fill out and then download on Excel and maybe manage it a little bit more smartly, because it's, talking nearly 400 properties along the beach.
It's very complex.
Yeah.
So just the average person who, they say, okay, I understand this berm concept. We'll talk about the broader renourishment in a minute. But the berm project, I understand this concept, so I'm going to have 3 options. Can you just sort of, in a general sense, give a rough idea of what the three options are, sort of ballpark?
So all of them have, I believe it's sea oats, railroad vine, and dune daisies. But the percentage of sea oats, you have one that has 70% sea oats, and then some dune daisy and railroad vine. Another one with maybe like 40% sea oats, and then more dune daisy and railroad vine. And then the low profile one, the majority of the grass is a bitter panicum, which is a little bit more low lying. Doesn't have that real high panicle that some people, obstructs their view, so they can do that, and it only has maybe, I think, like 15% sea oats and dune daisy and railroad vine. And then the other important thing is, in 5 years with the wind accumulating sand, etc., the dune management plan that's been signed off by FDEP, say they have a 6-foot dune, which can happen in some areas. We can work together and reduce that dune height, spread the sand back out, replant it so that their views aren't impacted. So they maintain that riparian right to have their beach views.
So the landowner can have some comfort that if the dune berm / evolving into a dune with an addition of vegetation gets too high or beyond a certain point, they could have some assurance that the town will come in and say, no, we're gonna fix this.
Yeah, we'll work with them. I mean, it's still their responsibility to maintain their property.
But they'll have the right to lower it. I guess
Yeah, we've reduced that regulatory liability to maintain that dune in place and to maintain that height and the trimming and getting out maybe some nuisance species like the sticker bushes and corn vine, etc.
So the choices are really more which kind of vegetation. You also have a choice as to how the berm and the dune is structured. Like you'd mentioned, there's some access points that the landowner would have some input on. What other sort of input would they have in the three choices aside from vegetation?
So again, the dune configuration, maybe instead of just a straight berm, you have maybe here and then something in front of it, maybe for privacy, or maybe people want a straight out view. Understanding that may have some scour issues in the past.
So you use the word scour. We hear that at Postia there's a lot of scouring on the beach. For those folks who have scouring in front of their property, and this berm comes along, is the scours going to be fixed as part of the berm project, the first wave?
As much as possible. FEMA does allow for additional sand placement to fill a scour hole to support the berm. And so they did approve a volume of sand to fill some of the scour holes, and then Chad's been working with his team diligently to try to take some of the screen sand and try to fill in some of those scour holes now in advance of the berm.
So if you don't sign the easement, you're going to have a hard time getting help fixing the scouring holes as well?
Yeah, I mean, I've just been reviewing some people. I mean, I get this question all the time, and what I do is I'll take, you wanted to bring in the sand yourself to not have any obligation to do any plantings or any dunes, and you want to bring in the sand yourself. Well, the ECL is about 50 feet away from your property, and your property is 100 feet wide, etc., and calculate a square yardage, and then say you need 3 feet, so it basically becomes a cubic yardage, and then multiply that by the effective rate of how much sand, and they see that that's in the tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars, and they quickly see what that advantage of what the town is bringing to them.
So we'll get into the granularity of the easement process in just a minute. So we've got the first wave, forgive the term, but you've got this berm going through most of the island that's trucked in sand, financed by the feds in the state, and it'll in essence be a barrier to prevent or to help prevent any particular damage from the next hurricane that comes. And then the second phase, which is our kind of our basic renourishment plan, which was to renourish all the beach of Fort Myers Beach, or most of the beach for those who signed the easement. And let's go through that one more time. So the second phase, and by the way, that starts kind of the end of this year, the fourth quarter of this year, because we have to do it after turtle season, is that right?
The goal would be to start as soon as we have permits in hand, which we're estimating will be late summer, and then we'll have the bid process to select that contractor. And what we don't want to do is we don't want to start pumping sand in the middle of shorebird, in the middle of sea turtle nesting season, because if we do that, we actually have to back up 60 days and start relocating nests. Well, since this is an island-wide plan, there's nowhere to relocate those sea turtle nests to. So we want to work with the turtle monitors, which has already begun, on how do we really minimize things in terms of any relocation. So by waiting till very late in the year, we can really avoid most, if not all, of the relocations and start pumping sand after almost all the nesting's done. If there's a few nests, we can relocate the contractor because we're doing island-wide plan, and so we can start working in places where all the nesting has already finished.
And this second wave, the renourishment wave, we're going to be taking the sand off the shore of the Gulf of Mexico here, and we're going to be pumping it onto the beach.
Correct.
I just, for a layperson, how do they get sand through a tube to pump with a lot of volume to fill this massive vacuum of sand that we have on the beach? This will be, by the way, between the berm and the ocean, the shore itself.
Correct.
That's where this second wave of sand is coming. How, from a physics standpoint, do they get that sand pumped literally? But sand is heavy. How do they do that?
Sure. Let me just clarify one thing on the berm, and then we'll move to that. I encourage everyone to take a look at the plans that have been prepared. We tried to mimic the pre-Ian grade as much as possible with the berm, and we talk about this plus 6.5 elevation. There were a lot of places along the beach that were at that elevation, and we're just restoring what was there before. In some cases, we have brought the grade up to meet the FEMA requirement, but the majority of the berm is meeting the grades that were there before the storm.
And what's the width of the berm vary? I know it varies from monument to monument, but in general, what's that variation of width of the berm?
So the calculations for the berm are very discrete, that we have to follow the FEMA guidelines, and so it will vary from the minimum is 10 feet wide to much as maybe 50 or 60 feet wide, depending on the severity of the erosion at each of the profiles that we measured. So there's some variability to the shape of the dune.
So back to how we get the sand from the Gulf of Mexico.
Sure.
How do you do that? How does it work from a practical, just a layperson's
So
perspective?
we have two different sand sources. The first one is the same bar area that was used in 2011. It's in the Ebb Shoal complex in the near shore of the Matanzas Pass. It's at the north end of the island.
Okay.
And that is in very shallow water, maybe 12 to 14 feet. And that would be a cutter head dredge. A cutter head dredge has a mechanical device, a cutter, has big teeth on it, and it rotates. And it has an arm, and the dredge lowers that arm, and it starts turning and churning and excavating into the sand. It has jets that shoot high pressure water and create a slurry, and it has a suction intake that sucks the sand and the water through the intake, through the dredge, out the back of the dredge into a pipe that's going to be floating for maybe 1,000 feet, maybe not even that, and then it's going to go into a pipe that's laid on the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico, submerged pipe that'll be laid from the bar area to the beach. And so this dredge has the horsepower, and it also has booster pumps that'll be on floating barges in line, and it creates that, as you said, the physics, it creates the force to push that sand and water through that pipe onto the beach, and when it comes out the pipe on the beach, it comes out in a spray, and it's about 20% sand, 80% water. And that's how they get it there.
And the water just drains away, obviously, right?
That is correct. That is correct. We also have what's new to the project. Because of the devastation of Ian, that nearshore bar area doesn't have enough sand in it to do the whole project. One of the reasons and the other benefits of the emergency berm is, and let me do some math, the original volume was 900,000 cubic yards. That's the volume to do the beach management plan pre-Ian. Post-Ian, it jumps to 1.12 million yards. So we had 220,000 yards of loss. The berm, it will be paid for by FEMA. That's 89,000 yards. That reduces how much sand we have to bring in from the offshore bar area. But we still don't have enough sand in the nearshore area. So we have worked with Lee County, who identified a beautiful sand body, and they're going through the permit process, and they're allowing the town to piggyback on that permit process and be able to access that sand. That sand is in federal waters, so there's an extra layer of permitting through the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, and they've been wonderful in working with all of us to, in essence, allow the both projects, the Lee County project, which is Lever's Key Bonita Beach, and Fort Myers Beach, to be kind of permitted concurrently. That way we have the ability to go get that sand if we want to.
And this sand is located offshore,
It's
closer
about-
to the south end or the north end? Or
It's
what?
11 miles off of Sanibel Island. It's about 28 miles as the crow flies from that sand body to the town's
Do you put it on a barge then? And
So there you go. So yeah, there's two ways to do it. There's a hopper dredge. A hopper dredge is like a big vacuum cleaner, and it sucks the sand off the bottom and into its hopper, which is literally just a big container, and it sails into about 30 feet to 20 feet of water, and we have little designated pump out areas, and they will moor the hopper dredge. They'll hook up to that pipe, and they'll pump it underwater through that pipe onto the beach, again using those booster barges. And so if anyone's seen beach projects built anywhere in the country and you see this big dredge sitting offshore, you're wondering, what is it doing? It's unloading its hopper and pumping sand through its pipe. Or that cutter head dredge could be put in the offshore bar area, and it's down there chewing up, and it puts its sand and it distributes the sand through what's called a spider barge. It's this really crazy piece of equipment that has all these arms on it that lower, and they have these, in essence, just scow barges. And we fill up the scow barges, and then tugs will bring them into that pump out area, and a second dredge called an unloader sits there, and it has its own little cutter head device that will resuspend the sand. It'll re-slurry the sand and pump it out. So there's two different methods to have the transport done along that long distance.
wow. So this second wave, the beach renourishment plan, will need a little less sand because this first wave that the feds and the state are taking care of, the berm wave,
Correct.
that will infuse quite a bit of sand. So we won't need quite as much, still need quite a bit. The second wave, the actual renourishment wave, the cost of that, is some of that going to be picked up by the feds now, or is it going to be traditionally funded like we had planned before?
So the feds will not contribute to the beach restoration project because you are not a federal project.
Kind of the beach renourishment project. Yeah.
Correct, the beach renourishment project. And so the funding comes from the town and from the Lee County TDC, the tourist tax, and then from the state of Florida.
Very similar to like we'd had structured before. And that-
Same structure. What has happened since Ian has occurred is the town share has not changed. It's still just under $1 million using our estimating tools. The state of Florida, again, based on what the legislature approved at their special session in December, is going to fund 100% of the additional losses attributed to Hurricane Ian that are not eligible for this emergency berm and other FEMA categories. So the town share won't change. You'll still pay your same amount, but we'll be able to do the whole project and put the extra sand there, and that cost will be through the TDC and through the state of Florida. Now there's one more element to cause even more math and funding fiscal tools in that, remember I talked about the north end of the island didn't have the category B berm eligibility. It has a different category with FEMA, category G, and that allows for projects that are engineered and maintained to have FEMA come in and pay for that sand to be put back on the beach. So it's possible that we will get an infusion of federal money to put, of the 1.12 million yards, about 56,000 yards is eligible on the north section through the FEMA category G. And that's still to be determined. We're still working on that
And
process.
that's how we'll pay for it.
Yes.
That doesn't mean the north end will get a sort of a berm wave. They won't be part of that first berm wave.
They will not.
But the second phase, we could actually get some fiscal help to pay for the second phase of that north piece. Is that what you're saying?
That is, we're trying desperately to make that happen. It's a very challenging time frame with FEMA for category G because of the environmental review that they do. But we're working with FEMA, the Bureau of Ocean Engineering Management, the DEP, and the Corps of Engineers to see if we can pull a miracle and get all of the federal agencies to approve it all in the same 4 or 5 month time frame.
That's great. I mean,
So, it'd be unprecedented.
It's extremely complex, but it's really, our partners have been extremely helpful in all this.
Absolutely.
The deadline for people to sign this easement, now how would people have received this easement form? Obviously people can't get their mail. How are you finding these folks, Chad? Is it just through email, through mail? Have you collected a list of everybody who lives on the shoreline?
Yeah, through email. I've had a lot of contact just with Sea Turtle, lighting, education, and so contacting them that way. We also are getting the letters in the mail and mailing it out to them. That's a challenge with the level of destruction that we've had and all of the issues. And then Bill Perry's been kind enough to share his customer list, so getting those emails as well. and sending out that blast.
If people have not received communication from the town and they live along the Gulf of Mexico, if they've not received anything from the town, should they reach out to you then?
They can, reach out to me, or again, go to that fmbgov.com. So Fort Myers Beach, fmbgov for government.com/beach. And they'll find the easement there as well. They can just scroll down, there's a hot link to the easement. It can be notarized in any state. I know we have state of Florida on there. I think I need to re-upload one that's more generic for the 50 states, but they can just cross that out if they need to get it notarized in Michigan or wherever they're at, and then just mail it over to us, 2525 Estero Boulevard.
And in a perfect world, you're hoping folks will make a decision on this by January 31st.
Which is today. I think we're gonna, we'll extend it out a couple weeks, but nothing gets people into action like a deadline. So we're just trying to get them to sign it as soon as possible. And the benefit, as Mike will tell you, is we need to know where we're placing sand. If we're not going to be placing sand somewhere, we need to let the contractor know that and plan how we're going to be doing things, just to minimize the cost to the town.
I've gotten some questions regarding the easement from folks who are skeptical, and I think it's important we try to wrestle with some of these. Has the council voted on this first wave, the berm concept? Has the council approved it?
So you've definitely been introduced to it, and I think I've gotten a consensus from y'all. I don't know if we've had a formal motion.
Does the council need to formally approve it, or is this something that's done by the feds, or I guess maybe that's a question for our town attorney.
Yeah.
But people ask me that. I say, I haven't seen the council formally approve this.
Yeah, I know y'all have formally approved the dune management plan and the FDEP permit. I think that was back in April of 2021. And that's all been stamped by...
Well, we'll talk about this on Monday at the next town council meeting, obviously. Just people had asked me that question. So people they're thinking about this is a 15-year easement. What does that mean, 15 years, and why 15 years, and what does that obligate the landowner to that during that 15 years? What's their obligations, and again, why 15 years?
So the life of our permit is 15 years. The state of Florida and the Corps of Engineers allow you to request a 15-year permit with the option to do renourishments. And in between those renourishments, for at least 3 years, we have an obligation to monitor the beach, knock down any escarpments that occur, which is vertical sand as storms occur, which would interfere with sea turtle nesting, and do the beach tilling. And then let's say that we do have a storm and you want to clear debris, or you want to do some dune maintenance on that dune system that we've put in place, or we have a storm and we want to truck sand in because there's a hot spot. Let's say we have a storm that not the magnitude of Ian, but something smaller that creates a little erosion problem in one part of the beach. We have the right to truck sand in and address that. By having the 15-year period, it will allow us to do the initial construction, the 3 years of post-construction work we have to do, address any hot spots between renourishment events, and then hopefully 10 years from now or longer, when it's time to do the beach project again, those easements are still in place. We don't have to go back and re-request easements to do the next nourishment.
Well, that leads to a number of folks have asked me, when the 15 years is up, does everything revert back to the landowner then? There's no lingering... I think there's a concern that the town or the government will have tentacles as a result of signing the 15-year easement that will go past the 15 years. Do you give up any of your rights after the 15 years by signing this easement? Is there any other tentacles that hang on and linger as a result of signing this particular easement, or does it start fresh again and all sort of contractual obligations are gone at that point?
Sure. Well, certainly I'm not an attorney, although I do play one on TV now and then.
But I get asked these questions.
What other projects that I've been involved with, and I've worked from Marco to Sarasota County over the last 3 decades, what other residents have told me is through their legal review of their attorneys reviewing it, that there is no other tentacle out there. This easement document we have used and was modified by the town attorney and by Chad's review. It's as resident and owner friendly as I've seen in terms of trying to accommodate and address all the questions and concerns that the residents have. And Chad's done a great job of trying to meet with them. Bill Perry's been helpful. Everyone's trying to really work together to explain. The whole purpose of the easement is to allow us to access this part of the property from that basically armoring, vegetation, structural limit seaward, and allow us to put sand on your property. And so I know there will be people who won't sign an easement. It happens on all of our projects. It just is the way it is. People believe that there's a taking of property rights and things like that, and I'm not about to tell anybody that they have to sign an easement. All I can do is I can encourage you as a coastal engineer that this is a good plan. It's a very favorable easement. It's a fair easement, and hopefully most people will see it that way.
If a property owner signs the easement, after they sign it for the next 15 years, what are their financial and other responsibilities with respect to that area in front of their property?
There are none because of the town's decision to not create like a municipal services benefit unit to fund the project. There is no tax being collected by the town of the residents.
But is there any obligation to maintain it? Any obligation to do anything with it?
Well, they can maintain it as they always have. Many of our residents already, pay to have their beach raked, and that will just
It's just
go on as it was.
their option though, right?
Sure.
Correct. There's no requirement. It's an optional thing. The dune management plan, as Chad said, has some provisions to do different things over time, but that's the property owners would choose to do it if they want to.
If the dune accretes and or the vegetation gets too high, is it then during this 15 years, is it the property owner's responsibility in conjunction with the town to restructure it or trim it down?
Yes.
Does that then become the property owner's responsibility?
Yes.
And that's really at their choice at that point. But they'll work with the town. They'll have the ability contractually to
Reduce the height.
reduce that height. Okay. So
Yep.
they'll have that right to do that if it becomes problematic for them.
Yep.
Because I think that's a lot of people have concerns about that.
Yep. Just reducing that regulatory liability, and they can.
Is the berm, which sounds like it evolves into a dune, is it in essence permanent then? As permanent as anything is on the beach.
Correct. I mean, the goal, of course, is to maintain that dune in perpetuity, but unfortunately, storms the magnitude of Ian are certainly going to have impacts. So, can't say it's going to be permanent, but it would be a nice feature to have there for the long duration.
I think I've hit all my questions. Is there anything that I've not addressed that you want to share with our listeners this morning that could be helpful? And you guys have gotten a lot of questions as well, commonly asked questions. Anything I've missed or anything you want to shed some light on or elaborate on that I haven't touched on?
I'd like to say one thing, and that is when we met at Town Hall and had our public meeting, there were questions raised about the one part of the beach in the center of the island that was not designated critically eroding.
It's near the Wyndham.
The 6,000 block. Yep.
Slightly accretional.
Yep, I've talked to those folks.
And they came to us and they said, we really don't want to be part of the project. We believe the beach is accretional, and so with that statements, we came back to administration and they said, respect their wishes, which is this plan is for the town. It's not something that Michael Poff or Coastal Engineering Consultants or Chad is trying to jam anybody's throat. And so we took that section out of the project, and it has been removed at the request of those property owners. So I say that because we're trying to work with everybody. We're trying to make it your plan, and so we're trying to, as best as Chad and I and the rest of the staff could be accommodating, we want to do that. Now, I still think it's still the right thing to be in the project. From a coastal engineering perspective, I had given my reasons at that time, but we respected the wishes, and we're going to continue to try to work with the property owners and hopefully can accommodate their requests.
Very good. Chad, anything you'd like to add?
No, read over the dune management plan. Again, it's only a 10-foot wide strip of vegetation, 75% of the width of your property. So, whenever you have a 250-foot beach in front of you or 200-foot beach in front of you, it's really just a small portion of that beach that we're obligating to put some dune vegetation for habitat and to stabilize that elevated portion of the beach for both your property protection and for habitat for the critters out there.
So, again, since we have the experts here, there's a lot of it's one of the great things about this renourishment plan, from my personal opinion, is that I use the term democratizes the beach. In other words, you can, as a member of the public, first of all, we've got 29 beach accesses I think we've got. which means anybody on the island for the most part. We have a little bit weak on the south end for beach access points, but most of the places on this island, anyone on the 7-mile barrier island can access the beach through the beach access points, which is, I think, unusual in a great way because it democratizes the beach. Anybody can use that beach. And the great thing about this renourishment plan is that, well, now there's gotten to a point where things were pretty grim in a couple parts of the island. You couldn't walk from one end of the island to the other anymore because of the erosion that's occurred. You couldn't ride your bike, couldn't walk. And I think this concept of being able to go anywhere, and I think it could help on our traffic challenges too, if more people use the beach for transportation. And when I say transportation, I mean walking or biking. And I just think this concept of the fact that anybody can use the beach anywhere on the beach. There's no private aspect of the beach. I just wonder if you touch on that. If you see a lot of places around Florida as you travel, is that unique? A, and then B, let's talk a little bit about from where the shoreline is up to the property line. What part of that's public? What part of that's private? When does it change? Is it based upon the tide? Just kind of give a thumbnail sketch for people as to how that all works.
Sure. So there's some uniqueness to Fort Myers Beach for sure, but there's certainly places that have the street ends and the public access points in the different municipalities. So I think this area is more commercial than a lot of the other beaches from like Sarasota County south. And so that's something that's not unique, but certainly more local to Fort Myers Beach than, say, Naples, or certainly not Bonita, Lover's Key, Charlotte County. Don't have that really true commercial right on the beachfront. And I think it's really neat. It's a great place to come. Like you said, there's a lot of enjoyment for the visitors and for the islanders to get to the beach and make it easy for them. It also garners you the funding. So if you didn't have those public access points, the state of Florida is not giving you any money. So your funding is directly related to how many public access points and how far up and down the beach you have that public access. So that's a big kudos to the town. As far as the demarcation of private property, so there's two different situations. From the north end of the beach down to Lanark Avenue, the erosion control line was established back for the original project. And even though the sand was only placed down the canal, that erosion control line remains in place. That's a demarcation between state ownership and private ownership. South of Lanark, we'll have a gap in the project where we said we were not going to do the project because the residents asked us not to. Then we pick up again on the south end around Crescente and Bermuda and Leonardo Arms. That's a critical wildlife area. And as of today, it still exists, and it is considered state-owned land. And we're getting 100% state cost sharing. $7.5 million, which is the south segment's cost, will be paid for by the state of Florida as of today if the critical wildlife area stays in place, and they've told us they understand it will stay in place. The residents own to the mean high water line, but there's a critical wildlife area overlay on that. I'm not going to get into the legalities other than the critical wildlife area allows for the state to manage the property and to allow for wildlife use and to mark nesting for shorebirds and other things on those barrier spits and what have you. So that's a different situation than the erosion control line.
So I always like to end with a little bit of a personal piece in that, Mike, you're an engineer. This is a pretty unique line of work that you do, and you're a specialist. What sort of an engineer are you, and does it have anything to do with what you're doing now?
Great question. I am a coastal engineer.
There's such a thing?
I have a master's degree in coastal engineering.
Okay.
And of course I work for a coastal engineering consultant, so I can't get it wrong. I encourage anyone who has their interest in math and science, I'll put a kudos in for the profession. Any of you that have children, sons, daughters, nieces, and nephews who have an affinity for math and science, it's a great career. I get to tell people I'm going to the beach today. It is a unique career. We don't have enough coastal engineers in the world to do what needs to be done. We don't have enough engineers in the world to do what needs to be done. So, but there are schools who specialize in having master's degree programs or undergraduate ocean engineering degrees. We also have coastal geologists, we have environmental scientists, we have designers. And so in little coastal engineering consultants here in Bonita Springs, we have all those careers, CAD designers, we have economists, fiscal, graphic designers, surveyors. So if you love any of those kind of careers, look us up. We do internships, so if you got kids in college and you're interested in being on a boat and being on a beach, have them send us their resumes. We'll entertain them for an internship.
Excellent. Chad, what's your background?
Undergrad biology over at Emory University, and did a semester abroad in Turks and Caicos, and really got turned on to marine biology, and ended up doing my master's over at James Cook University doing tropical marine ecology, and fell in love with that. And then my dad actually opened up a clothing store, or bought a clothing store down in Marco Island. And while I was procrastinating with my master's final paper to write it, I ended up diving into the world of internet marketing when I was still pretty young, and we were selling Tommy Bahama shirts before TommyBahama.com was going, and it's hard to stop doing something whenever you're making money, and got really into internet marketing and graphic design and all the Google ads and all that stuff when the ads were still 10 cents an ad, and you won't find that too often anymore. So I did that for a while, and moved back to the States in 2010. We were in Australia for about 10 years. And if anybody's looking for career advice and you're working with your family, it's better to be half a world away than in the same building as your family when you're working with them. In about 2015, I think I took a job with the city of Marco and started doing environmental management, plan review, and that kind of stuff. That's actually where I met Michael first.
Yeah,
it was on that first
Atterholt Beach
project. Yep.
Mike, you did not say where you went to college. Where did you get your coastal engineering degree?
So I grew up in Lebanon, Pennsylvania, Amish country.
Uh-huh.
So I tell people I'm half Amish, I'm half Floridian, and I did a lot of work in Louisiana, so I'm half Cajun.
Uh-huh.
Went to University of Delaware for my undergraduate. Then I worked in Ocean City, New Jersey, at the beach, not working on beaches yet. Then I went back to Delaware and got my master's degree, and then moved down here. I've been here, this will be my 30th year.
Very good. Well, thank you both for your service to
Very
the
welcome.
town.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for being with us today. Thank you for watching. If you know somebody who lives on the Gulf, please forward this to them. Post it on your Facebook page. Help us get the word out. We're trying to answer all the questions. We know there's a lot of important questions. There's a lot of concerns, and we're trying to address them. Nobody's trying to hide anything. Please keep those questions coming. If you're wrestling with the easement and you've got some additional questions, reach out to Chad and Mike, because we really want to progress one way or the other. We want to get this thing going. There's a lot of potential help involved from the state and the feds that we've got to utilize, and we've got a certain amount of timeline to do that. So thanks for watching so much. And again, please feel free to share this with others who might be impacted, or just those who care about the beach. Again, thanks. My name's Jim Atterholt. I'm the Vice Mayor. Again, thank you for watching Key Questions with Key Staffers, and I hope you have a blessed day. God bless. Bye-bye. Thank you.